Welcome to the Getting High on Leadership series featuring Paul Karasik. Paul is one of America's top management consultants helping leaders succeed. He is the author of 9 books, including Sweet Persuasion and Brilliant Thoughts and Provocative Questions. His insights appear regularly in major publications, and he is one of the most sought-after executive coaches. Paul founded the American Seminar Leaders Association and the Psychedelic Institute of Los Angeles. He is a popular speaker at national conferences and has been on stages across all 50 states and internationally. Paul's work addresses the question, how can we transform conflict in business into collaboration? With decades of experience in management, leadership, and psychedelics, he brings a unique perspective on personal and societal growth. In this series, we'll be discussing his latest book, Getting High on Leadership, The Leader's Guide to Higher Consciousness. We'll be exploring the concepts, techniques, and mindset required to revolutionize leadership. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the series. My name is Rob, your host, and we are joined by Paul Karasik, author of Getting High on Leadership. As we make our way through the book, we are focusing on each section one at a time, and today's section is When You Speak, and it can be found on page 91 of the book. And I think we've been talking about the actions that a leader needs to take, how important communication really is, and I think this section really drills down on that statement. Where should we begin, Paul?
Well, I think it's there's a real simple message in this one, and that's one of my mentors used to, when I'd start talking to him or trying to cop a plea, or he'd always say, "Now you're talking words," and I knew what he meant, like I was using some intellectual process to communicate to him. And he was saying, you got to come from feelings, and they've got to be together, as like the content and the feeling are relevant. So if somebody speaks, I really love you, like, I don't know about that, as opposed to I really love you, that. So the words have some potency, but really the feeling is really what it's about. And this is kind of a little bit of a warning to say to people, don't think it's just the words. That you, when you're communicating, you're also communicating that a feeling with those words. And that's the real thing, because it doesn't matter what somebody says, it matters how you feel when they say it. And that's going to be touched by the feelings of the person who's communicating. So it's like a cautionary tale, this chapter.
Yeah,
when you
speak beyond just those words,
just
the
those
surface
words.
level of communication.
Yeah, speak to their consciousness. Speak to the universal consciousness that exists within them. Speak to their heart, their feeling, their empathy. Speak to their spirit, their unique soul connection to the universe. Speak to that, and you'll get more results than when you just speak at somebody, right? With just the words, you got to get this done, da 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 da. But even in those technical things, we can be less offensive and more respectful. And so we say, speak to their heart, speak to their spirit, but also speak from your spirit. Speak from your heart. And that's the way you can get to speak to them. And then you create a better environment, which is also the point.
Yeah, I mean, much better environment, right? How, even though if you have some demands and, working with you is challenging, if you're communicating those demands from the heart, realizing I'm a person trying to connect on that level too, while shoving those demands my way. I mean, the odds are that is going to last a lot longer than it would if I was just getting an email or a task list with the demands, right?
Exactly. So it's speak to their consciousness and speak from your consciousness. And that's going to be the best talk. It's not, you don't have to use tricky techniques. It's not that you shouldn't learn how to be a skilled speaker.
Practice some social techniques or
yeah.
communication
There's some techniques, but it's not about that. I remember years ago, I was at a stadium at an event, and there was a speaker. It was at Montreal Olympic Stadium, so it was pretty full. I think 70,000 people, and it was like a sort of a motivational type thing, and the main speaker comes up, and it's like this older woman, dressed really plain. And you're expecting like this motivational thing or something like that. I mean, but she was as common and mundane as anybody you'd ever see. And within about 15 minutes, I'm bawling tears. I mean, because she's so authentic, and what she's saying is so. And she didn't have any technique. I teach never stand behind a podium. Like I said, there's certain techniques that are very, very helpful in communicating, at least in that kind of a venue. Not, we're being broader here, but in that kind of a venue. And she broke all those things. She didn't use any of those techniques. She just came from her heart. And for 20 or 30 minutes, everybody in the stadium was like, oh my God,
They were all on the same page.
Yeah, and she didn't manipulate. Sometimes I see people that's when they speak, they manipulate. They, it's cheap stuff, and anybody can do it, but you don't have to. You're much more powerful when you just come from your heart and communicate from your heart. You don't have to be tricky and dramatic and that type of thing. So
right, and they could kind of start with any level of communication, or even with your maybe even internal communication, right? How you're talking to yourself, trying to go back to that root still, because you need to make sure everything's solid leading up to those words actually coming out of your mouth to make sure you
make a great point. You make a great point, and it comes back to stuff we've covered quite a bit in this course, and it begins with you. Before you can speak to their spirit, you have to be in communication with your own spirit. Before you can speak to their heart, you have to get into your own heart. Before you can speak to their conscious, you have to be conscious of what's going on in yourself. You're only going to be as effective as that when you speak. So there's a certain responsibility. If I want to really speak to that deeper part of the person and not just this transactional, you're a member of the team, get it done, and if you don't get it done, I'm going to be pissed off. That we're not in that level because we're recognizing the fact that that person has universal consciousness within them, as we do. And therefore, I was just talking with some friends, some pretty high-powered financial people yesterday. We had dinner together, and we talked about the syndrome of, my room's not ready. We walk into like the pompous, egotistical life, which we all admitted that we have lived at some point during this lifetime, which is like, my room's not ready? Do you know who I am? So, like we all get into and I've traveled the world speaking and doing stuff, and I've done that. My
even though you're showing up as the speaker, right? It doesn't change the reality around you that a housekeeper called in sick or that someone checked out late.
Well, no consideration, and the fact that I'm totally absorbed in me and my ego and what I need, and unconscious of the other person, and that's the type of mentality that makes bad bosses and bad leaders, with no recognition, and that's a bad way to live, to treat other people that way,
And with that mindset, almost any interaction you have with that kind of mindset, it's going to come off the same way.
It's going to be words.
Abrasive and
it's
only going to disconnect rather than bring you closer, facilitating kind of collaboration, right?
Yeah, and so authenticity when you speak, and that's really the core message for this particular chapter, is be authentic, speak from your heart, speak to their heart, recognize they're people, they have as much or more potential in life as you do. Just because you have a different role doesn't make you better than anybody else. We're going to cover chapter in a little bit called the leader's a member of the team.
Ooh, a little teaser.
Yeah, on that whole concept. But that it helps to, before you communicate, say, where am I coming from? Am I coming from fear? Am I coming from ego? Ego and fear are the same thing. Am I coming from fear and ego? Or am I coming from the truth? Because the truth is forever. Fear and ego are concepts that don't even exist. They're thoughts and ideas. And when we die, they die. But truth is eternal. Are we coming from that place? Or are we coming from the other place when we speak? So I would probably put a bow on it right there.
No, well put, man. I wouldn't change anything with that. Folks, thank you for listening and watching. Take this advice to heart. Look at the interactions that you've had communicating in the past. See where you were coming from, how that affected things, and look outward to change that communication pattern going forward. As always, feel free to start this journey picking from any section that catches your interest from the beginning, or just join us on the next one. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Getting High on Leadership series. If you have any questions, you can comment below or send them in via email to paul@paulkarasik.com. Follow him on Instagram at PK_theconversation. Find out more at wholesalerinstitute.com and psychedelic-awakening.com. The Getting High on Leadership series is produced by Rob Sanchez and Apartment 113, which can be found at apartment113.com and followed on Instagram at APT_113.